Okay. Can you hear me? Is everything good? Hopefully. So this is my other campaign. This is my real campaign. Where we're out of the test save and we're into something big. Something much bigger. Okay. So I designed this a while ago. I haven't flown it yet, and I haven't tested it at all, but we're gonna see what happens. You know, I should probably have some radiators on the outside. Both. This is... Ideally, this is going to be like an all-purposes ship that I will keep in orbit around Kerbin, dock with it in orbit, and then launch it to different places. It has 4,000 meters per second of delta V on its own. That's enough to go to most places in the solar system one way, and then it's got ISRU gear, it's got drills, and it's got the ability to convert ore into fuel, which is good. Do I have an ore tank? I should have an ore tank. Where's my ore tank? It might be clipped inside. Is it? It does not appear to be. I'm glad I checked that, because that's a problem, because that would be an absolute disaster if I didn't have that. So, let me... get a couple small tanks and put those in here. That should work. So Gilly's a really easy place to land on, and I don't need a ship this big for it. But my hope is to get this in orbit once, and because it's a $1.2 million ship. So hopefully I can. It's very loud. So it literally is change in velocity. So that's just, if you're in space, there's no drag. So if I want to go in a direction, I just need to accelerate in that direction. But if I'm fighting against gravity, if I'm doing orbital mechanics and I'm trying to escape from one planet and go to another planet, I need a certain amount of delta V to escape from one planet and get somewhere else. So if I have my delta V map up somewhere. So, like, if I want to get from the surface of Kerbin to the orbit of Kerbin, I need about 3,400 meters per second of delta V. That's accounting for gravity losses, that's accounting for atmospheric drag. Technically, Kerbin orbital velocity is like 2,000 something, but accounting for losses, I need about 3,400. If I want to go from Kerbin to the moon, I need about 860 meters per second to get from a low Kerbin orbit to a flyby of the moon. And then if I want to go from a flyby of the moon to an orbit of the moon, I need to be able to slow down 300 meters. And if I want to go from a low orbit of the moon to landing, I need about 580. So if I want to build a ship that goes from the surface of Kerbin to the surface of the moon, I need to have 3,400 plus 860 plus 310 plus 580. So that's sort of my metric for designing a ship. And then if I need to get back home, I need to then, do that in reverse to a certain extent. And, obviously there's cheats you can use using gravity assist or using, braking on the atmosphere. But generally speaking, delta V is your metric for how you design a ship. So if I want to go to Gilly, I need 3,400 plus 950 to escape Kerbin. That'll put me on a solar orbit. Then I need another between 90 and 430. This is because of orbital inclination. That's a whole other thing. But so to get to Gilly, I need about 5,000 meters per second total, accounting for both escaping Kerbin and getting all the way to landing. Gilly is ridiculously tiny, so I need 30 meters per second total to land on it. Versus even the moon requires, you know, 20 times that. But obviously this ship here only has less than 4,000, but that's what orbital refueling's for, which is, we'll worry about that in a minute. So I'm just trying to make sure, because this is a big mission, a big expensive mission. I want to make sure I have everything set. So I've got lights on this ship. I've got docking ports to refuel. I've got all of my ISRU in situ resource utilization, meaning the ability to refuel from ore from another planet. I've got a shitload of science experiments, including the really expensive, like, high-end ones. I should have plenty of... So I've got 3 years of resources. That's going to be more than enough, but I wouldn't mind having a bit more. I know it flies. It's just a question. Like, I've tested it to this extent that, like, I know it's got the thrust to weight. I know it's got the... I know the landing works. I know the landing legs work. I know all that stuff. But it's the sort of thing you get, you know, 3 hours into a mission and you realize, like, oh shit, one of the doors is blocked, or one of the ladders doesn't work, or one of the flaps got screwed up or something. Also, I did update mods between when I tested this and right now, so there's a very good chance something horrible happens, because I had to do a bunch of config edits to make this work, because these parts are not designed the way I'm designed to be used the way I'm using them. But we'll make it work. Fortunately, on Gilly, you don't need ladders. You can literally, this entire ship I will probably land with just the maneuvering thrusters, because I don't know what the force of gravity on Gilly is, but it's like 0.001% the gravity on Kerbin. It's like, it's single digit millimeters per second versus 9.8 meters per second on Kerbin or Earth. Oh yeah, I was going to add a little radiator to the outside, so I don't have to keep these doors open all the time. How much heat does this thing output? I actually might need bigger than, or more than, a little radiator. You know, it's fine. I can just, because I have a small nuclear reactor on here, no big deal. It's right next to all of the science experiments, which is probably fine. But obviously you run a nuclear reactor, you need to have radiators, which is what these are for. Which means I have to keep the doors open anytime the reactor's running, but that's fine. It's not a big deal. Yeah, it's just, this is my like piloting area, or my cockpit. This is my habitation module. I've got a lab. I've got my greenhouse and my aquaculture, like, recycling module. They're just sitting right next to the nuclear reactor. This is where all of my food and all of my recycling of resources goes. It would be close. It might be like the EVA thruster packs in this game the Kerbals have are crazy overpowered, so it might theoretically be possible to just launch the ship by shoving it with a Kerbal or two. You can, if you're a Kerbal with a jetpack, you have enough Delta V in your jetpack to just take off and leave Gilly on foot. In fact, I'm going to give these guys some cool new uniforms, too, as long as they're here. Isn't there a way to customize the colors? I thought there was. Actually, should be customizing the color, too. Scientists get blue, engineers get orange, pilots get black. It's the way you gotta do it. I'll note that last time I did a mission to Gilly, Gilly is so low gravity that it's very weird and glitchy, so there's absolutely a chance something goes horribly wrong in that regard, but we'll make it work. You know, we're going to send this engineer too, just because I don't want him being left out. Every single Kerbal I have is going on this mission. There might be some that are on my space station right now just hanging out, so they're going to miss it out. But so this leaves me with 2.5 years of food resources. Or no, 3.5 years. Which is not terrible, but not great. I forget if I can harvest fertilizer with ore. I think I can. But we'll find out. Is this fertilizer tank full? It is. I could add another one, but that would take away more, or that would take more mass and more delta V. So, yeah, I have 18 tons of fertilizer right now. Okay, yeah. For Gilly, I should not need more than this much. Although, if I want to reuse this ship for future missions, having more space for fertilizer might help. That is a header tank. That is technically not necessary for this design, because that's mainly for landing starships, and this one isn't going to land the same way others do. But if I go to Duna or Lathe or something, it might be necessary. So I've got I might do a separate thing of, because I mean this architecture is going to work kind of like a real starship would, where you have tanker starships and crewed ones, and I might need to. I have a mod installed that lets you record flights, so you can just hit a button and just redo them rather than having to, because refueling a ship like this is going to take 2 or 3 tanker flights, and doing that manually would take like several hours. So instead, you just do one very careful flight, and you optimize it as much as you can, and then you just record that, and then you can just refly it whenever you want. So I have a flight like that saved, but I think I have other optimizations I can make to make it better, so I might do that in the future, and then you can actually see how this thing lands. But, because it is fun, but right now I just want to go to Gilly, so. And we are still going to use the aerodynamics, because we got these, alright, let me close the door first. We've got our flaps, because we're going to have to aero brake on Eve, which is like Gilly is orbiting the Venus analog, basically. So we're going to fly to Eve, we're going to use Eve to aero brake, and then land on Gilly. So I'm just very paranoid because I don't want to get into space and then be like, oh wait, I forgot something important. But I think we've got basically everything here. Got all my thrusters, I've got all my fuel. I think we're good. Although then we need to close these doors. We need to save this entire thing. Actually, do I have my booster as... Okay, I do have my booster as a sub-assembly. So this... That's my root part here. When you build a ship this big, there's some weirdness with regards to how you have to manage it in the VAB just to move stuff around. This is absolutely the kitchen sink approach to building a ship. And this is one of the reasons I always get stuck on playthroughs, is because I refuse to build ships. I refuse to do missions that are compromises. Everything is just absurd. So, if I can load this... Oh, shit. Oh, that's bad. Don't crash. So there's the booster for it, which is way shorter than a real super heavy booster is, but... That has way too much thrust, or, thrust. Why does it have so much thrust? Oh, because this thing is built for launching the tankers, not launching the crewed one. So on a tanker, instead of this having like a bunch of open space where the crew lives, it has just a big tank of fuel up there. So what I could do to save some fuel in the future is just strap another couple, or another small fuel tank in there. And that gives me, still has a 1.8 thrust to weight. Costs way more. I mean, this is a $2.5 million mission. But it should be fine. Because this first stage is going to boost back and be recovered, and then the upper stage is going to be reused, It technically can't land on Kerbin, but that's fine because it's gonna come back from Gilly, arrow break on in Kerbin's atmosphere, and then just hang out in orbit, and then I can refuel it and fly it again to a different mission. The only worry I have is with this bigger, super heavy tank, I might have to worry about recovering it. In fact, I'm gonna pull that tank out. I'm just gonna go with this. It's technically less efficient, and it's got way too much. I could pull some of these engines off. I don't need this many. Alright, that works. So that's less thrust, but I don't actually need that much thrust, and it's substantially cheaper. So, because these engines are 40,000 a piece, so that was like 100,000, a couple 100,000 I just pulled off. Okay, so let's close that up. Let's save, double check, make sure the crew, because the game really likes to just fuck with your crew assignments. But I think it's fine. I have a bunch of 4-star crew. I think this mission will be enough to get them to 5 stars, which would be super convenient. I think we're good to go. Let me do a auto strut thing. And then turn it off on here. Okay. Bit nervous, but it should be fine. Let's do it. Are these locked? They should be locked. Oh, my flap's waggling. Okay, so I'm going to burn a significant chunk of my fuel just getting this to orbit, but then I'll refuel it in orbit and it'll all be fine. Although... Oh, wait a minute. Hang on, something got screwed up in the staging here. Okay, that looks closer to accurate. That's off. Okay. I think we're good. I think. We'll find out. It's a very good chance something horrible happens the second I load this, but we're gonna see. Oh yeah, I should probably ping everybody. I mean, my space program is currently worth about 8 million total. So this is only representing about, a third of my entire space program's net worth. I haven't actually... Wait, hang on. I didn't check what my launch window is right now, because I don't remember if I set it to... So if I create a new alarm for a transfer window to Eve... So that's... Okay, hang on. Let me revert that real quick. I may have made a mistake because I can't launch for another 240 days. Approximately, because that's when the transfer window to the planet I'm going to opens up. And if I launch before that, I will just be sitting on the pad wasting life support resources until then. Which would not be ideal. Okay, so... Let's test out this vanilla alarm clock. Planetary transfer window to Eve. Is there a way to set an offset on here? Because I want to launch like 10 or 15 days ahead of time so that I have time to refuel before I actually have to leave. But with stock one, that's not an option, so we'll use the modded one. And this one is saying... What? Oh, that was the problem. Okay, there we go. But I want a margin of about 30 hours, probably. Yeah, the time between this alarm clock and the other alarm clock is different, which is maybe a worry, but it's fine. This one might be accounting for the inclination, which would be, or the other one is accounting for the inclination, because I guess hopefully this doesn't take forever to load. So last time I streamed, I went to Duna, which is the next planet out in the solar system. Eve is the next planet in this, closer to the sun in the solar system. So I'm going that way. The delta V requirements are not that far off, but you can see Eve has a little bit of a. I guess you can't really see it super well. Eve has a little bit of an inclination relative to the orbital plane. So it's not a huge amount, and it's not that big of a cost to correct for it. But it is, compared to Duna, which is much closer to flat. Yeah, it's showing a bunch of extra orbits that I don't care about here. Is there a way to turn that off? I don't know why I can't turn that off. Anyway. But yes, basically, there's a little bit of an inclination. I don't know if one or both of these alarm clocks are accounting for that. Because it means that even if there's technically a transfer window where Eve is in the right spot relative to Kerbin, in terms of where they are in their orbits, it might not be accounting for some transfer windows are going to be at the worst possible spot inclination wise, so it might just be skipping those. So hopefully that's what's happening here. If not, whatever, we have enough delta V to account for it, I think. Also, I just lost. Oh, okay. I guess I lost some money. That's because I hired some more astronauts recently. So I'm just gonna start fast forwarding a whole bunch and waiting for this time to come up. Here, let me do this from the tracking station so I can actually watch to make sure the phase angle is right. So basically, what we want to launch when Eve is a little bit behind Kerbin, because Eve is going to be moving faster than us because it's closer to the sun. The closer you are to a body, the faster you are moving relative to other objects. So you can see Moho in here, which is the Mercury analog, is moving real quick, just zipping around because it's so close to the sun. It's being pulled with more gravity or more force of gravity, which means that it has to move faster to counteract that. So at every orbital altitude, there is a fixed velocity that you need to have a stable circular orbit. The closer you are, the higher that number is. The further you are, the lower that number is. So that's why if you're trying to go to a body closer than where you are, you need that body to be behind you, because when you launch, you're going to be launching, you're going to be catching up with it on the other side of the orbit, so you need to launch in such a way that the place you're going to will catch up with you right at the same time that you happen to hit the same altitude, if that makes sense. We got 70 more days. $20 days. Okay, that should be good. So, Eve is right here, a little bit behind me. It's all good. So now, if I go to... Now if I just go to the launch pad... Oh god, I don't know which one's the right one. I think they're identical. Yeah, I don't know why there's two of those. Of course, it took away my entire crew setup here, so... to go through and... Okay, I think we're good. Let's try this again. The one thing I'm worried about is I have a contract to build a specific type of ship, and I'm hoping that this one... I'm pretty sure this one fulfills that, but I might have... Hopefully I didn't forget a part, because there might be a part that's needed to technically fulfill the contract. Okay, so here's this. Let me... If I go into my contracts... Okay, so I just need to take this ship and take it to Eve, and I'm good. And a whole bunch of other contracts related to this too. Also, I just realized I have a contract in here that I technically can't do, but that's fine. I'll do another mission for that later. So, I think we're good to just launch. Let's go. Might be loud. The volume on these engines is weird sometimes. Also, that's... thrust to weight seems very low, but it's fine. Probably could have just left those other engines on, but oh well. So the real Starship stack, the booster is like twice as long as this, but because Kerbal is weird about its mass fractions and stuff, and its engine thrust to weight, it's also running slow because the game's running in slow motion because the physics are having trouble. So it's like 1.5 speed or something like that right now. Anytime the clock appears yellow, that means your game is struggling with physics calculations. That's in part because I have so many engines. The more engines you have running, that tends to fuck with it. Okay, I can start... Oh, which way is my pitch over? This way is my pitch over. It basically has to, because if the physics get off, then everything breaks and explodes, so you basically have to account for that. Okay, so when I have a couple hundred meters per second left, I need to cut the engine, stage early, spin this booster around, and boost it back towards the launch site. And then the Starship will go on the rest of the way on its own. Although at the speed everything's running, that'll be a little bit. So my thruster weight is technically 2 right now, but despite that, it's running super slow. Well, we're not going to see the booster landing because I have a mod installed that'll do it kind of automatically. As long as I get it back near the launch site with fuel left and a probe core on it, it'll land on its own. Okay, so that's probably enough. Let's cut the engines. Stage. Fire up these engines a little bit. Then this, turn RCS on, and then start twisting back a little bit. Oh, that was actually a really early staging, but that's fine. So we're just going to turn around, and we're going to fire up those engines pretty much full bore. Lock that, and then that'll take care of itself. Now back to this. Let's get to orbit. So this guy is doing his own thing, going back. Oh, that's going up. Why are you going up so high? Get that nose down. Get that nose down. Why is your nose going up? That might be a design flaw. Why are you doing that? Why the fuck are you doing that? That might be a... Okay, this might be a reset situation. Okay, it was because of drag on the fins. So we'll see. I think we still should have plenty of delta V to handle this, but that was a problem. Let's just fold these in for now. It's a bit much to have that much extra unnecessary drag. Oh, these are... There might be a mass imbalance on this or something, because it's not supposed to be flying like this. So I might have to add some gimbal to these engines, because that's... Actually, yeah, I just realized I'm flying prograde, which is not good for how low I am in the atmosphere. Yeah, this might be a wash, this flight. I fucked it up a bit. Let's hold an attitude more like this. Actually... Yeah, I'm going down right now. That's bad. Okay, so we're gonna revert this because that's a... So problem is that because I have these huge vacuum engines in the normally the Starship would have three powerful locked vacuum engines and then three less powerful, or three equally powerful but less efficient sea level engines in the middle, which would be which would have gimbal, and that would help you steer the ship. But I took those engines off of this, which appears to be a mistake. So if we load this up, let's get rid of the VAB, pull that off. So these engines currently have no gimbal, but I think they might need some gimbal. Let's see, what's their max? Their max is 3. Let's put it to 50%. It's probably going to result in some clipping through the sides of the engine bay or whatever, but I think that might just be a necessary evil. Because the reaction control thrusters in this, even though I've got them very overpowered, I think they're still just not powerful enough to compensate. Because this is just a very heavy ship when it's fully fueled. So... with 1.5 degrees of gimbal, that's not a lot, but that should be enough, hopefully, to counteract just the weird aerodynamics of this thing. Let's Put that back on. And then let's try this again. What? Oh, I get it. So that doesn't have cooling on for some reason. Should. Does this have cooling on? It does. Let me actually increase the priority from there. And of course it fucked up my crew again. God, I fucking hate that so much. There are so many times that you set up a mission, you revert it to fix something, and then you launch it again, and then you have to revert it again because it took your crew off. And it's just so stupid. Why it doesn't, by default, just go, okay, well, you set a crew, that means you probably want that crew on there always. You took the time to do it manually. Okay. Let's try this again. Hopefully that little bit of gimbal's enough. It might not be, but we'll find out. Well, that crew was not going to orbit. That crew was going straight into the ocean at like Mach 5. Once this thing's in orbit, it should be fine. Just got to get it there in an efficient and safe manner. Also, I can stage the booster a little bit later this time, which should help. I can also, I took a really shallow trajectory that time. I should be able to, if I take a steeper, like if I turn later, that'll mean that the upper stage is further outside the atmosphere when I stage, which means that these flaps are going to have less weirdness with them, and the thrusters will be more powerful, relatively speaking. So that might also help. So let's try this again. It might also be worth it to slap those extra engines that I took off back on, because this is a very slow initial takeoff, and the cost, the additional cost should be minimal because this booster is getting recovered, and the additional weight from those engines might be offset by the fuel saved by taking off in a more quickly, and then I can pitch over sooner, and then my delta V is going more towards getting to orbit and less towards fighting gravity. So that's an option if this doesn't go well this time. I was making sure the trajectories mod wasn't turned on, because when it's turned on it lags the game, which contributes to the launch looking super slow. So making sure it's turned off helps a little bit. Alright, let's just stick with a trajectory like this for a little bit. Another advantage to a more vertical takeoff is that, you know, pitching over later, is that it means that the booster has to do less work to get back to the launch site, which means I can stage it later, which means less fuel is spent, on the boost back. Whereas the further down range you get before you stage, the more fuel you have to save to boost yourself back. So last time I staged at like about 40 or 400 meters per second of fuel in the first stage. This time I'll try 300 and see how that works. So cut engines, stage, very slightly increase the engines. Get away so I don't blow up the start of that stage. Turn around, take this, turn it. Little bit of engine thrust so I can use the gimbals on these to spin myself. And then full engines pointing that away. Okay, now that's taken care of. Back to this. Okay, so there actually doesn't appear to be clipping, because there's so little gimbal. It should be fine. Combined with these thrusters, hopefully that's enough. Get myself up. So my apoapsis time is going down, which is not ideal, but that hopefully as I get higher in the atmosphere, these engines get more powerful, and also my thrust to weight increases, and it should be fine. Generally, your apoapsis, you want to keep the time to it around like 45 seconds-ish. Because that means that if it's too high, that means you're wasting too much fuel going against gravity, and if it's too low, that means you're just not going to make it to space. So around like 45 seconds is ideal. Right now it's dipping below that, but again, that's just until I get, until I burn enough fuel that it's accounted for. Okay, first stage recovered, got 97% of the money back, so. Covered 730,000 out of, I assume. Although that's the cost of the stage itself. It doesn't account for the fuel, but fuel is relatively inexpensive compared to everything else. Okay, so now my timed apoapsis is going back up because I've burned enough fuel that I've got a higher thrust to weight, so I'm now gaining velocity faster than I'm falling. Means I can start to pitch over more. I still probably could have gone for a slightly, more vertical takeoff, but this should be fine. Yeah, my thrust weight started at like 0.96 or something like that. Now it's 0.12, which is substantially better. Zoom out. See, I'm a little bit of distance from the apoapsis, but I'm not like, you don't want the apoapsis to be all the way over here this early in the flight, because that just means you don't want it to be up here, because that means you're just wasting fuel fighting gravity. So you want to have a nice, parabola that gradually wraps around the planet right around the same time that it gets outside the atmosphere, because that means you've got the optimally efficient launch. I do have a mod that does all the math for you, and you can like relaunch the same mission multiple times so we can test out different trajectories and find the perfect one, but that takes a bunch of extra time and it's not really necessary. See, the nose cone's glowing a little bit because I'm starting to go so fast in the atmosphere that it's heating up, but that's alright. I'm actually going too shallow a little bit. My apoapsis, my timed apoapsis is good. My actual apoapsis is still inside the atmosphere, so I want to get that a little bit higher up, so I'm lofting myself properly. I've still got 2,700 meters per second of delta V though, so it's fine. And these reaction thrusters are running methane, which is the same thing the engines are running on. I actually had to mod that to make that work. That they do exist in reality, but the mods that I've installed don't have any methane thrusters. But it just prevents me from having to carry a separate fuel to fire those things. Technically, they're also more efficient because they're running a more efficient fuel, but... Okay, so you can see if I zoom out that as opposed to going vertically and then at the top of my arc I have to expend a ton of fuel to actually circularize, here I'm circularizing as I go, which is significantly more efficient. It does mean I'm in the atmosphere longer and I'm losing more fuel to drag, but the trajectory fuel savings typically outweigh that as long as your ship isn't super drag heavy. And I mean, granted, yeah, actually right now I'm seeing almost no drag. And technically these flaps are giving me a little bit of lift too, which is totally unnecessary, but it's more than nothing. So let's get myself to like 90,000-ish. Yeah, I'm gonna have a shit ton of fuel left. Okay, there's 91,000. So now if I just point prograde and I wait for myself to get into the top of my orbit, and then I can circularize. And then I will be in orbit with still almost half my fuel left. Alright, so... Let's see, what do I have for lights? So I got a couple lights in the engine bay, and then I got the rest of them right here. Oh yeah, and I have a couple of navigation lights on the flaps too. Forgot about those. Can I crank up the power on those? Nah, I don't think I can. You can barely even see them, but... Let's time warp a little bit just to get into orbit. Or just get into space so that I can get into orbit. Alright, I'm now in space. See, the frame rate goes up a little bit the second I get into space because there's less math going on. So, let's circularize, then we can actually turn on the reactor and turn on the solar panels and get this whole thing up and functional before we start refueling it. So, let's go into MechJet and set up a circularization burn. So yeah, I need less than 200 meters per second to circularize because of how shallow my trajectory was taking off. If I had taken a much more vertical, like, you know, if I had gotten into space, if my arc had looked like a straight up U up here, then it would probably take closer to like 900 or 1,000 meters per second to circularize. So it's all about a balance depending on the thrust of your ship and the aerodynamics of your ship. I mean, in theory it could, but it's... Like, in theory you could use cows to generate methane, but in reality you would just... Actually, I wonder, because the main way that SpaceX plans to make rocket fuel is they're just going to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere, combine it with water to make CH4. You know, you pull hydrogen out of water, you pull carbon out of CO2, and then you wind up with a bunch of oxygen you can turn into liquid oxygen, and you wind up with a bunch of carbon and hydrogen you can turn into CH4, which is methane. So they plan to just do it with the air. I don't know if there's some way they could set up their air harvesting farm on a farm and also pull in the extra methane, but I think even the largest herd of cows generating cow farts would probably not be enough to generate 1,000 tons worth of methane in any reasonable manner. It's like the power, like, I mean, they're building like a megawatt solar farm at Starbase solely for the purpose of generating fuel. Okay, that's a good enough orbit. It's off by like 1,000 meters, but that's fine. So, let's start opening this thing up. Got this. Got... Okay, stop rotating first of all. Let's just stabilize this thing. I mean, they claim a lot of things are hurting the atmosphere. Put those solar panels out there. Let's turn on all these... Or no, let me get these radiators out so I can turn on my nuclear power. So... let's enable reactor, and then I think I can turn my power setting to... I only need a fraction of the thing's power total, I think. Okay, so that's not enough. Although the reactor's still... There we go. Okay, so now I can turn on all these habitats, which is... we'll keep my crew alive. Turn on life support. Turn on agroponics. Turn on more life support. So even with all that, I'm still making a huge surplus of power. So I can actually turn this generator down to like 20% probably. Yeah, let's do 30%. Wait for it to stabilize, see how much power that is. It's still a huge surplus. Oh wait, no, it's... I don't know if these reactors account for that. I don't think they do. What if it's at 20% or 25%? Still too much. Okay, 25% is the minimum, so I guess I'm just going to sit at 25%. So what I've actually gotten here, just for reference, on this side is the reactor, below it is a little nuclear fuel storage thing. And I can actually take the depleted fuel and combine it with ore to renew it. I don't have the nuclear reprocessor on this ship, but there is a separate item you can put on here to reprocess spent uranium into usable uranium with ore, which is useful. On this side, I've got my ISR unit, which is what I will use to turn ore into fuel, and hopefully fertilizer, if that works. Here I've got... Actually, here, let me adjust my camera so I can actually... There we go, that looks better. Here I have just a big cockpit area, very high-tech cockpit. Got my... This is just a habitation module. Can I look inside these? I think I can. Though I don't know which room these guys are in, so whatever. I've got a lot of Kerbals on here, and that makes this complicated to... Okay, this guy's in the right one. So this is the habitation module. He's just got a little sleeping bay here. Can't actually see out there. Oh, okay, here's another guy in habitation module. Here's the middle of it. Just a bunch of rooms. This door's open. If we go to the cockpit area... See, got fancy holograms and shit, because this is a near future cockpit. You can see my little relay sets up there. I'm going to deploy those around Gilly to give myself communications. Can't really see much. You can see some stars out there. If I rotated the... Actually, can I rotate the entire ship from here? Slowly. So if I do this... You can see the surface of Kerbin start to come into view. And there's the sunrise. This control panel here is not very useful. They're just having a blast. I mean, come on. Would you not be having a blast if you were up here? Got Plant 3 over there just hanging out. Oh, hey, Oker's in chat. I didn't even see that. What's up, Oker? Or Okra. I don't even know how to pronounce your name. Alright, so that's these guys. Then down... Let's see, who's in the lab right now? Bob's in the lab. Where's Bob? Where's Bob? So this guy is... Oh, this is a bad view. He's just staring at a wall because that's a fun-looking wall. So yeah, this is my little lab. So basically I take science experiments and then rather than recover them on Kerbin, like you normally would, I put them into the lab and these guys will do science on site, which will then produce a huge increase in science versus if I just recovered them all. So that's fun. Then, okay, these are the guys in the sleeping quarters. There's cockpit guys. So this is the aquaculture module. So I got some fish in here. So they basically... I don't know how the process works. If they're... Basically, these guys serve as a science experiment because I'm technically bringing animals into space, which, you know, that's science-y. But also, I get to... Having these fish helps me recycle waste. I don't know how specifically that's meant to work. Some with nitrates and algae or something. But... So these guys, this is actually a significant resources savings for long-term missions because it recycles a ton of stuff. Oh, there's a better view of it. Just a cool little spot. And then I've got my greenhouse, which... So this is the center of the greenhouse. You can't really see the plants from in here. But you can see there's plants out here that are exposed to space. This looks a lot cooler if you have it on a more traditional deep space looking ship, which I'll build in the future when I have really advanced engines. But then you know, you actually have your plants exposed to space, which I don't know if that's... I don't think that's realistic, but it's cool looking, so it's worth it. These are getting toasty, I guess. I don't think they should be getting that toasty, although they're only at 60% cooling right now, so that should be fine. When I did the math in the VAB, I should be able to run every single heat producing and electricity producing thing at full blast at once and not run out of power, including the ISRU, which I don't need to worry about for a while. So then up here I've got a set of relay sats. These I will deploy, you know, there's 3 of them. They basically are just what Starlink is basically meant to be, except a little bit bigger because I don't have the parts to make really tiny ones. So they'll get deployed into a resonant orbit around Gilly so that I have constant communication with my science deployable stuff, which is all down here. So that'll be on the surface. I'll deploy that. Got my radiators. And I've just got a whole shitload of science experiments here, which I can actually run through right now. Even though I'm in Kerbin orbit and a lot of this, I've done all the science of this orbit, because I have the lab on board, I can use this science to have my scientists start doing stuff while I am busy refueling. What I'm doing right now is I'm getting set up to refuel this ship so I can send it to Eve and then by extension to Gilly. Let's turn all these scanners on. Am I still power positive? I am. There we go. So that's a whole bunch of science. And then so I can start research. Now I'm making 10 science a day just from that data I got in low Kerbin orbit. And low Kerbin orbit is the worst science you can get, basically, in terms of quality. So if I... Also, because I have this laboratory, I can use it to clean up the other experiments without having to send a Kerbal out. Which is a shame, because I put this seat on here specifically so I could just park a Kerbal out in space to fix those experiments for me. But oh well. So there's my starship. It's just hanging out. right now, being Starship. Actually, I can also level up my crew while I'm here. So, just turned a bunch of my level 0 guys into level 1 guys because they've been to space now. But I can keep doing that throughout the mission. So, we'll just call this we'll call this Gilly Mission dash Kerbin orbit. Save that. And then, gotta go back to the Space Center and launch a couple missions to refuel this. I might, because I saved so much fuel taking off, I might only need one refueling tanker, which would be nice and cheap. So that's kind of like the big thing about Starship in real life, and also just in general with space stuff, is that the second you have a capability to refuel things in orbit, it massively changes the game, because it means rather than having to optimize everything and put like a 3 or a 4 stage ship into orbit to, I mean, you look at the Apollo mission, you had, let me see if I can get like a picture of it. Saturn V Apollo stages. So it's a really low quality image here. Is there a better one? God, Google image. I'm just gonna go to fucking Bing right now because the images are probably less shit. I can actually click on them and open them. Saturn 5 stages. See, it's the same image, it's just better. Okay, so Saturn V, it's the biggest rocket ever flown in terms of overall mass. So you've got big first stage, giant engines, that just gets dumped in the ocean. You've got a second stage, several similarly large engines, that just gets dumped in the ocean. You've got the third stage, that is in orbit, and it shoots everything else towards the moon, and then that gets dumped. That'll just fly off into deep space or fly off into the surface of the moon, depending on how they set it. Then you've got this command module, which is connected to the return capsule. So you've got the service module, which is connected to the command module. So that's basically that's used to break with, So the third stage here shoots you to the moon. The command module and service module slow you down when you're at the moon and put you into a moon orbit. Then that is also going to be connected to the landing module, or the landing vehicle, which that disconnects with the command module, lands down on the surface of the moon. Then that itself has a second stage that it dumps the landing legs and all the landing gear and shoots that back to orbit to dock back with the command module. Then that remainder of the landing stage gets dumped, and then the command module sends you back to Earth, and then the service module gets dumped so that only this tiny capsule returns. So for all of this, to go to the moon and back, you need, arguably, you're looking at like 5-ish stages. 6, I guess, if you count the lunar module as 2. So 6 stages, because you have to take everything with you. Now you compare that to Starship. And Starship is currently certified to go to the moon. Like, that is the moon lander. So it's a big fucking rocket, but you've got a big booster, and you've got a second stage. So the booster launches the second stage up, and then it turns around and lands. And then the second stage, it gets to orbit with 150 tons and 0 fuel. So it's just sitting in low orbit with a bunch of payload, but nothing to do with it. Then you launch another one, except instead of 150 tons of like useful payload, it's got 150 tons of fuel. And then you do that like 6 or 7 times, and you dock with the main Starship that has useful payload. All that payload, so you just keep dumping fuel into that useful Starship, and then all of those tanker starships that are just carrying fuel just turn around and land back on Earth. So you're technically launching tons of ships, but all of them are getting fully recovered. So all you're expending is a bunch of fuel, and fuel's cheap, especially once you start manufacturing it yourself out of the air, out of solar energy. So then at that point, you've got a fully fueled Starship with, in Kerbal terms, like 4,000 meters per second of delta V. In reality, I think it's like 9,000, but that's because real life is weird with distances and velocities compared to Kerbal. But so like at that point, you've got a fully fueled very powerful, very large stage with 150 tons of payload that can go most places in the solar system very easily, as opposed to having this huge rocket, almost all of which gets completely dumped, and then is tons of stages, tons of complexity. I can't speak right now. So that's the fundamental difference between this design, and it's all based on the ability to refuel in orbit. So, assuming this saved properly, transport. Yes, okay. So I previously did this mission, which was just a very similar looking starship, but it was, instead of having all that crew stuff and the reactor and the ISRU and all that, it's just got a whole bunch of fuel tanks inside to carry extra fuel, and it can carry 343 tons of just fuel. Obviously, Kerbal, because it's Kerbal, has very different payload capacities and stuff, so it's not comparable to reality in that terms. But in terms of design, it is. So then I can head up here, load this thing up with as much fuel and oxidizer as it'll hold. If I can get it just right. I don't know why that's being weird right now. Oh, that's too much. So the way this mod, so this is absolutely a mod. It's not a in-game thing or a default in-game thing. But it basically just means rather than having to do a bunch of tanker flights to refuel this one ship, I've just done one ever, and now I can use this tanker, this launch profile at the same cost and the same time and the same money, basically all the same constraints as the first time I launched it, and just do it automatically rather than having to tediously dock multiple ships with the starship or with the actual ship every time I launch it. I'm just trying to find the right amount that I can put on this thing to fill it up. There we go. So this mission will cost 560,000, which is a lot, but considering that that full stack cost me 2.5 million, it means that in 20 minutes that will put 342 tons worth of fuel into that starship. And I'm not sure how fueled that's going to be. It won't be fully fueled, but it might be enough to give me enough Delta V to get to even back. Let me just check if I were to launch another one. I might have to do two refuelings actually. Yeah, I'm probably going to have to do two. I should have checked what the actual capacity is. So let's launch another one. And at some point it'll be full enough that... I might need three. We'll see. We'll let those two finish, and then we'll pop back into the starship and see where we're at. So you can see there's an ETA on here. And there we go. Oh, it actually automatically puts alarm clocks in there for me, so I can just fast forward fast and it'll slow it down when it's time. There we go. So let's see, is it still... Alright, let's just pop back in and see how full that ship is now. I might need to do another one. I didn't fully... Because like I said, that recorded flight I did previously is not as optimal as it could be, so I could make it better.